Hello, BookTube. Last week I watched a video by Alex at What Page Are You On, where he talked about his favorite writers. And when I was finished with it, I said, that was good, but it could be weaponized. It could be turned Borg style into a tag. And although Alex didn't intend it as a tag, I made it into a tag and imposed it on the rest of you. And I thought that would be the end of it. But no, no. Just yesterday, I watched a great video by Claudia at Spinster's Library. A video in which she describes 10 things she wished she'd known before she started a BookTube channel. And it was wonderful, where she grades them on a spectrum. Slowly they shade from the most negative all the way up to the most positive. And it's done in her usual style. I'll leave a link to it down below if you're familiar with her channel. She's terrifically smart, and she also has an understated dry humor, the delivery of which is pitch perfect, and not a skill to be overlooked because it's extremely rare. And I watched her video. Of course, it's mainly for other booktubers, and I watched her video nodding the whole time, just fascinated at a look behind the scenes of what booktubing is like for her now that she's no longer a newbie, now that she's done it a while. And if you've made more than 1 or 2 videos, you're no longer a newbie. And when I was done with her video, I thought, that was really good, but I should weaponize it. So it's Tag Tuesday, and I guess none of your content is safe. Next week, who knows? It'll be, I was watching a knitting video by Sarah at Steeped in Books, and I thought, this should be a tag. None of you are safe. So, without further ado, the description of her video that she gave in the thumbnail of the video itself was BookTube side effects. And without further ado, I have weaponized it into the BookTube side effects tag. So we're going to go through the 10 things that she brings up. And the tag is basically for you to sit back, have a sip of wine, and tell us your own stories about these things, any that apply or all. This is exactly the kind of nosy, behind-the-scenes stuff I love to hear from fellow booktubers. And some of you may be saying, well, isn't it a little incestuous for booktubers to just make tags for other booktubers? What about the rest of us? What about those who lurk or only comment? And my response is simple. Make a BookTube channel. Okay? Why aren't you making a BookTube channel? Make a BookTube channel. This little corner of BookTube anyway, without any fairy lights, without any, cinematic edits of any kind, without any of the staged theatrics. This little corner BookTube, we're just talking to each other about books, and we've had all sorts of familiar faces from your comments field, fellow commentators, Kathy Grimm, Peggy Kurkowski. Even Jason Harrigan. If BookTube can withstand videos by Jason Harrigan, we can take anything. So my response to people who are saying, well, is this just a tag for other booktubers, is become a booktuber. What's with the holdup anyway? It's easy to do. Somewhere within 5 feet of you at any moment, there is a device that can film video well enough for you to upload to YouTube. And all the rest of us in this little corner of BookTube want to hear what you're reading, what you're thinking about what you're reading, what you're thinking about things that don't have anything to do with reading. It's just make a video and chat. But anyway, so we're going to go through these and sort of transmogrify the comments that Claudia made into comments/questions. So number 1 is, she starts off with, keep in mind, she's starting off with the very worst. And the very worst is hate comments, troll comments, creepy comments. And she describes hilariously some of the things that some of said comments that she gets. And I don't mean to jump on any bandwagons here, but I watch a lot of BookTube, and I am in the comments field. I look at the comments field on all the videos that I watch. And I have to say, the kind of utterly presumptuous, incredibly insulting, creepy comment that she describes in her video, I see that happen at least 90% more with female booktubers than I do with male booktubers. Male booktubers just don't seem to get that, and I wish that I could say otherwise. I wish that I could say, that rudeness is just split demographically down the middle, but It's not something that I've seen. When I watch, if I were to watch, let's say 30 BookTube videos in one afternoon, and in those 30 videos, I then looked at all the comments, and let's say out of all the comments for all 30 of those channels, all together in that one afternoon, let's say there were 300 comments. And let's say you showed me the comments, but you didn't show me the channels. And some of the comments were presumptuous about physical appearance. You really should take more care of yourself. I loved your points, but your eyeliner distracted me. Those comments are all going to be by men directed at women. But anyway, I agree with some of what Claudia said. I don't. When she said that the only comments that she will immediately just peremptorily remove along these lines are ones that are just blatantly insulting, not just to her, but with insulting, racist, incendiary, bigoted language just in general. I agree with that completely. You just have to remove that sort of crap. You can't engage with it. Those people don't want engagement. In fact, I would argue that trolls just in general don't want engagement, and that it's easy to spot them. It isn't easy to spot them elsewhere on YouTube. But on this little corner of BookTube, they stick out a mile away. We're mostly interested in talking to each other or joshing with each other. But trolls want to inflame a mob and make you feel bad. And so they stick out a mile away. And one thing that I would add to the comments for this prompt in what is now a tag are clueless comments. Not people that obviously don't mean any aggression, but they don't understand that a comment is part of a dialogue. So they'll leave a comment saying, let's say I did a video on a couple of great books about naval history, and I get let's say I get 20 comments, and the first 5 are, interesting video, I didn't know this about so and so, have you ever heard of so and so, what do you think of so and so, and then lodged in the middle of them like a pit of a fruit is, such and such wrote such and such a book on such and such a date. It was published by such and such. And that's it. It's just a statement of fact. That's all it is. And that's it. Then the person's gone. That's the only comment that they wanted to leave. Those baffle me. They just baffle me. This is all about dialogue. And that is neither a part of dialogue nor inviting a response. So I never know what to make of them. But prompt number 2 is scamming emails, which Claudia apparently gets quite a few of, and I've never got one. And I have to assume, since I've done almost 3,000 videos, I have to assume here, just isolated, in this one case in her video, I have to assume that the number of scamming emails that she's getting is directly related not so much to the number of scammers that are out there, but to the quality of her email filters. Whatever email that she uses, I'm assuming, is just not catching these things, because otherwise wouldn't I get them? I mean, aren't they a function of how many videos you have out there, or are they? Actually, this is a question that I would have for my fellow booktubers, all of whom are summarily commanded to do this tag. Do you get scamming emails of the type that she describes? I'll leave a link to her video, but you've probably seen her video already anyway. Do you get scamming emails like that? And if so, what do you do with them? Keep in mind, the whole point of this tag, now that it is a tag, is to tell stories, and where all of our stories are going to vary in terms of emphasis. Like for instance, prompt number 3 for Claudia was pushy authors, indie authors who contact her and say, can I send you my book? When it's obvious to her that they don't know anything about her channel. They've just found her at random. They're just emailing random booktubers without really paying attention to what their content is. She even said that some people have gone so far as to say, if you will praise my book, I will share the proceeds with you. Good Lord. Again, this has never happened to me. I have once in a blue moon been contacted by an indie author. But they seem to get it. They seem to understand. Of course, mainstream publishing, the publicists from the mainstream publishing world have known me for a long time, and they know their job. Almost all of them know their job. You can spot a newcomer a mile away because they'll make newcomer mistakes. They'll put words in your mouth. They'll try and fish for commitment or whatever. Well, that's not how the system works. You're a publicist. You've got a stack of review copies of this book. You want to spread the word far and wide. Somebody who looks halfway legitimate asks you for a review copy. You send it to them, and you hope that they review it. And that's every single video, without any fail. You hope that they do, but you don't push them on it. You don't prod them for it. That's not the way it goes at all. And most publicists know that. And every indie author that I've ever been contacted with also knows that. They just want to know if they can send me a copy of their book. Would you read it? Maybe would you consider reviewing it? A lot of them, not a lot, there's very few people who have actually contacted me. I actually wish that more indie authors would. A couple of the indie authors who have contacted me have realized what I don't take any trouble to deny, which is that even if I don't, I am going to read your book. I read everything I'm sent. Eventually, I read everything I'm sent. Unless it's so far outside my wheelhouse that it would be Greek to me, in which case I try my best to find a reviewer for it. But I read almost everything I'm sent. And I'm definitely going to do that. I may or may not review it, but the one other thing that a couple of indie authors have realized is that I'm going to get it in the mail. I'm going to get your book in the mail. I'm going to hold it up in front of an audience of quite a few people and talk about it. That's worth the price of postage right there. And a couple of indie authors have realized that, but not as many as I would like. Actually, it's kind of heresy considering that this is still a stage in Claudia's responses where she was listing negatives. But I would love it if more pushy authors contacted me, as long as they understand or can quickly be trained that, to understand how the reviewing world works. You can't coerce a review out of anyone. The mere attempt to try is going to guarantee that you don't get a review from anybody. So, as long as the indie authors understand that, I would like to see more. I love the indie author world. And I used to be the editor at the Historical Novel Review Indie branch. And I got a huge number of small press and self-published historical fiction. And I miss that. That's one of the only things about that job that I miss. So I'm all for it. Then prompt number 4 is one of the things that Claudia wished that she knew about before she started a BookTube channel is FOMO. I did not have to Google that. I actually am cool enough to know what that means. It means fear of missing out. where she says on her channel, and I'm sure it's true for a lot of you, that she goes to the library, she goes to used bookstores, she's not a new release kind of person. And she warns people watching her video, if you are thinking about making a BookTube channel that even sometimes glances at new releases, you should beware of how much that's going to cost. New releases are expensive. Or in Australia, hideously expensive, from what I gather. But sometimes it affects her. Even her. I'm sure that sometimes it affects everybody. Like, for instance, the hype train for The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. Is there anyone who was invulnerable to that? Even I worked hard to get a copy of the book. Was absolutely not worth the effort, but it's all over BookTube like a rash. Same thing happened on a smaller scale with Duck's Newburyport. I'm wondering, this is another thing where I would turn the question around to you. Do you ever feel that? I myself don't so much feel that because I have a level of expectation. I'm expecting to get a lot of these things. So FOMO doesn't really take heart unless you're thinking you're missing, not only that you're missing out, but that you're missing out on your only chance. Whereas, even if I hadn't made efforts to get a copy, an e-copy of The Testaments, one would still have reached me in due time anyway. So it wasn't all that much of urgency about it. But what about you? When you see something like that, especially on BookTube, when you see a book making the rounds on BookTube, do you feel an urge to go out and get it? And I'm also wondering whether or not that crosses date lines. If you're an American booktuber and you see something catch on like wildfire with the UK booktubers, does that stop it from catching to you? Do you look at that and say, well, that's in the UK? Does it have to be America before you start to feel FOMO? Or is it just the number of videos in a row you see that mentions the same thing? Curious about that. So, but you all have to answer these things anyway. So, then prompt number 5 is, this is a good one, Claudia. Leave it to her to notice these things. Number 5 for her was, one of the things she wished she'd known is how hard it is to explain BookTube to people who don't do BookTube. And her dramatization of a typical conversation is hilarious. Again, I will leave a link to her video. It's hilarious. I have never really had that conversation myself, because the divide in my life between the people who have any interest at all, any knowledge, where there's any possibility that I even mention BookTube, The divide between those people and the people where there just isn't any chance, where it would never even come up, is so wide. It's like as wide as the Grand Canyon. So there's no chance. I've never encountered the problem because the people I bring up BookTube to already know what BookTube is. And the people I don't bring it up with, I'm never even tempted to bother. They're just not, I would have to explain the entire internet to them. It's amazing how many people, once you get into the groove of making videos, it's amazing how many people don't seem to know anything about not just BookTube, but YouTube just in general. This multi-trillion, gazillion-dollar company that reaches into every corner of the world and that is a driver of so much content. There are how many multi-millionaires who made their fortune on YouTube? How many of the people out there that I talk to who are completely clueless about YouTube, they seem not even to have heard of it. How many people out there, their whole apartment block is owned by someone who was a YouTuber? It's amazing how many people are like that. And, you know, whether it's at a newspaper or whether it's just in the reviewing world or old friends of mine on Beacon Hill, I can tell already that with some of them, the only way that I could explain what BookTube is, if I explained what YouTube is and what video making is, just in general. And that gets a little bit silly. So for me, there is no gap. When I meet somebody a young person, for instance, I hang out with young people a lot, and they of course know what YouTube is, and a lot of them aspire to be YouTube stars. They just don't have the wherewithal. And so, for instance, my teenage boys, they know exactly what YouTube is, and I don't need to explain to them. Instead, we just move straight to the mockery phase, because although they understand what YouTube is, they consider it absolutely hilarious that a whole bunch of do you even lift book nerds get together to talk about books. that just boggles their tiny little minds. Let's see here. Prompt number 6 is BookTube categorizing. Claudia points out, she's as gentle as she can be, that the way we categorize books and the way you get into the habit of categorizing books once you're a part of BookTube is not normal. That is entirely true. Read-alongs, buddy reads, all that sort of stuff. All of a sudden, the topography of your personal reading, the most personal thing in your life, all of a sudden the topography of it starts to change. Now, I myself don't resist that. I don't think that I didn't get the real impression that she does either. It's just noteworthy, that's all. I'm wondering if it's true for you. For me, the topography of my reading has changed, definitely, and it continues to change as a result of BookTube. For instance, especially rereading. I mean, there's a certain aspect, a certain chunk of my reading, a large chunk of my reading, that isn't changed at all. I still get tons of new books in the mail, and those new books all have the obligation. I need to read them. I need to decide whether or not to review them, and if I'm going to review them, I have to decide where I'm going to review them. And that, BookTube doesn't have any effect on that. I don't know if that would change if there were more book reviewers on BookTube, but so far, that isn't the case, so I still don't know. But when it comes to rereading, my rereading used to be fairly wandery. I kept it to, 10-20% of my reading was rereading, but what I would reread was sort of driven by the last thing that I felt like I needed to buff up on, or something that was mentioned in a review that I just read, or something like that. Whereas a lot of my rereading now has been co-opted by the very things that are mentioned here, by read-alongs and buddy reads and that sort of thing, where if I'm going to be doing the rereading, why not do it with a group of people? I love that. But I'm wondering if that's true for you. Have you noticed that the landscape of your reading changes as a result of BookTube? And if so, what do you think of it? And how does it change? Then number 7 was that Claudia noticed a change in the way she reads. That because she is now a booktuber, when she reads, she's now much more conscious of how things are done, how to enunciate her reactions to those things, instead of just a vague reaction that you're never going to commit to any kind of transmittable media. You're never going to tell anyone because you don't have any other bookish people in your life, and you're never going to write it down, and you're certainly not going to talk about it on camera if you don't have a BookTube channel. And she mentions in her video that now that she does those things, it has changed the way she reads. It's made her reading more critical, more aware, more hyper-aware in the moment, and by implication, more articulated internally, just as a reflex. You start to articulate in anticipation of needing to do that for an audience. And this is one aspect of booktubing where BookTube has not changed that for me at all. I was for a long time in the American Midwest, I was a book reviewer, and you don't have to be a book reviewer, especially if you're making your living off it. You don't have to do that for very long before you are just a critical reader, and it's not a switch that you turn on or off. It's just on forever, and that's definitely true again now. So even when I'm reading garbage, just pure pleasure garbage, I'm still thinking, well, you did this here, but you did this 3 chapters ago. I wonder if this theme is running throughout. That seems to be a characterization weakness of yours. You keep doing that. And I guess by reflex, what I'm saying is by reflex now, every thought that I have about a book is transmittable. All of it is happening, even if I know there's no chance that I'm going to be reviewing the book. My reactions are still reviewer reactions. And I'm wondering again if this is true for you. If it has to be, right? That if you have a BookTube channel and you've never reviewed anything, you have to have noticed the change that she's talking about here. But let's see here. Then we're steadily moving towards the positives here. Number 8 is new skills. Claudia mentions that booktubing has improved her editing skills, her filming skills, of course, but also her public speaking skills. That she spends a significant portion of time every week talking to a camera, and that when you do that, and I imagine it's only accelerated if you edit yourself on a program, so it's just staring at your own self and noticing your tics of vocabulary, your tics of delivery, your hand and face aspect. If you edit yourself, then you must spend hours noticing those things. Even if you don't edit, I would imagine that you would make it more self-aware. Definitely. My own self, it hasn't worked so much. It hasn't worked so much for me. Of course, in little ways. You're talking to the camera, you start to notice little ways where you can, so to speak, pause to rest a bit in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a couple of sentences. You learn stock phrases, much like the Homeric bards learn whole stock descriptions. Not necessarily because your audience was waiting for those descriptions, but because those descriptions required less art. They could just be brutally memorized, and they gave your mind a moment to relax and rest before you go on to something that requires lots of active work. I think all of us have phrases and little bits and pauses like that. But as far as the rest of it, there's something wrong with me. And it has been from the very beginning. From the very beginning, when Chris and Giselle turned the camera on me, from the very beginning, something has been wrong, because when I look at the camera, I just immediately see an audience of people. I see people that I'm talking to, not a camera. So nothing about this feels awkward to me at all. It goes away in a fraction of a second. For a fraction of a second after I've hit the start button, I am aware that I am talking to a piece of technology, and that there's many layers of technological behavior I need to do before anyone else can see it. But after a few seconds, that goes away completely, and all of a sudden I'm just talking to you. So I don't think my delivery has improved any. I think if you were to somehow lose a bet and need to watch all of my videos, I don't think you would notice much difference in my delivery. Maybe I talk a little louder, and maybe I talk a little more direct, and those are things I've learned, to be more courteous to a video watching audience. But the rest of it, I don't think I've learned any of these new skills. And of course, I mean, Claudia mentions in her video that before she started BookTube, she had no idea how to edit a video. She had to learn all that. She had to try programs and figure them out and learn to get better at it. And she's very good at it now. I have never done that. I have tried a couple of times, and it all seems so artificial that I just don't do it at all. But you will have stories, and you are legally enjoined to tell me those stories. So, then number 9 is new books discovered, which I agree with wholeheartedly. No matter what BookTube channel it is, you could have somebody who has the Library of Congress behind them, or you could have somebody who has maybe 15 books and goes to the library all the time. Doesn't matter. I'm still going to find a book. or two that I either didn't know about, or much more likely in my case, a book that I did know about, but that I am considering in a different way because of you. So you hold up a book and you say, I just found this, and my first reaction is, okay, well, yeah, I read that when it came out, and I know what I think about it. And then you go on talking about it, and suddenly the second part is less sure. I'm not so sure what I think about it anymore. Maybe I should revisit it. How many times has that happened, where I've revisited a book because of BookTube? I can't even count. And always a pleasure to do, always rewarding to do. So that one I definitely agree with. And then the last one, number 10 on the list, the best thing of all about BookTube, Claudia already warned, she already worried that it would sound like the most cliche thing in the world, but it's absolutely true. And that is the community involved. The fact that you meet, well, Claudia's never met another booktuber. I can't wait until that happens. It's a lot of fun. But the fact that you would meet electronically, that you would get to know people that you would never have otherwise met from all over the world, because you have this one thing in common. You have books in common, and book people are the best. I have experienced that almost from the very beginning of my BookTube channel. I have experienced that in adversity and in good times, and it is wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So many of you have agreed to give me your mailing addresses and let me send you books. I've even visited some people, and some people have visited me, and it's so much fun. There's no downside to it. It is by far, I agree with her completely, it is by far the best thing about BookTube. And the thing that I was told, I watched a lot of BookTube newbie tags before I made my own and before I joined BookTube, so I knew that a lot of people had said this. It's almost the universal response. But I guess there was a part of me that didn't quite believe it until I experienced it, and it is incredible. And this brings us back full circle to where we started, which is that if you don't have a BookTube channel, you are missing out on that community. That community is real. It's a pure positive that you can add to your life. That's how I think of it. BookTube is a pure positive I have added to my life that simply didn't exist before. Could have, and just didn't. You don't get many chances in life to just add a pure positive thing to your life. This is one of those times. So if you don't have a BookTube channel, make a BookTube channel. You are required by law to make the BookTube newbie tag first so that we can all find you and make fun of your t-shirt choices. But then after you're done with that, feel free to do this. And of course, the rest of you don't have a choice. I have, once again, Borg style, weaponized a perfectly innocent video into a tag, and now you must all do it. I'm tagging all of you. So there you go. Tag Tuesday. Terror Tuesday. I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.